Let's go back to the 2015 NFL season. Trying to defend their AFC title, the Broncos would lose to 3-seed Indianapolis Colts in the divisional round 24-13, ending their season a little early. Even though in 2014 he was still putting up good numbers and he was 2 years removed from an all-time historic season, time was running out for Peyton Manning, and if they didn't win a Super Bowl here soon or even this season, they might never in a long time. When we look at the preseason Super Bowl odds, the Broncos were sitting at number 6 and they were projected to win the AFC West, so it was safe to say that expectations for them this season were high. Not only did the Broncos meet expectations, they surpassed them as they won the AFC West like they were expected to, but they also finished 12-4 and had the number 1 seed in the AFC, so of course, Peyton Manning was good this year, right? Well, you'd be wrong, as Peyton Manning would easily have the worst season of his entire career, as in just 9 games, he would throw for a little over 2,000 yards, 9 touchdowns, and a staggering 17 interceptions. On top of all this, in Week 10, Peyton Manning would break the all-time passing record for most yards in a career, and then just a few plays later, he would have to go out because he tore a ligament in his foot, and I meant to say like the next quarter, because he had thrown 4 interceptions in the span of 2 quarters. I don't know I forgot how many interceptions it was, but he had an awful game up to that point, and many people thought that this should be his final season. Despite Peyton Manning's poor play, the Broncos were good, like I said earlier. In fact, they started off to a 7-0 start, and the only 2 games they lost were Peyton Manning's final 2 starts. So it's clear something else is going on. Anyway, the QB who was in absence for Peyton Manning was Brock Osweiler, who was a little better than Peyton Manning, but he still wasn't great. He threw for a little under 2,000 yards, 10 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions, and they went 5-2, including beating the, at the time, undefeated Patriots. So the quarterbacks and really the offense in general was not the reason why this team was so good in 2015. So what was the reason why? Well, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure this riddle out. It's the other side of the ball, the defense. The focal point of this Denver Broncos defense was linebacker Von Miller, who was drafted 2nd overall in the 2011 NFL Draft behind a certain guy named Cam Newton, who we'll talk about later. Anyway, up to that point, Von Miller was a very good player. In 2011, he won Defensive Rookie of the Year. In 2012, he won Defensive Player of the Year. And in 2013, he missed majority of the season. But in 2014 and 2015, he was back. And 2015 was another All-Pro season for the linebacker. Also on the other side of Von Miller was veteran DeMarcus Ware, who they signed in the 2014 offseason from the Dallas Cowboys, and he was signed to bolster the defense, but also be a veteran leader towards Von Miller and the rest of the defense. And in his 3 seasons with the Broncos, he was very impactful and was a big reason why this defense was as good as it was. Other notable guys on the defense included defensive end Derek Wolfe, who finished with 5.5 sacks, and defensive tackle Malik Jackson, who also finished with 5.5 sacks, and he played a big part in the postseason, and he later became a Pro Bowl in Jacksonville in 2017, a part of the famous Jacksonville defense. The other 2 notable names on the front 7 were linebackers Brandon Marshall, don't get confused with the wide receiver, and Danny Trevathan, who both finished among the top of the league in tackles. Now, another reason this defense was so good was the secondary, and it's actually the main reason why this defense was so good, and it was famously nicknamed the no-fly zone. So I'm about to show 3 players, and you can argue for any of these players to be the best player in 2015, but in my opinion, it was Aqib Talib, as he had 3 interceptions, and all the guys I'm about to mention made the Pro Bowl team, but Aqib Talib, when you combine his past experience and what he did the next season, he made the All-Pro team. I think he's the best player here, and ironically enough, the previous team he played for before the Broncos was the Patriots. Their other cornerback, Chris Harris Jr., was an undrafted free agent from Kansas who they signed in 2011, and ever since he stepped on the field with them, he's been a very solid contributor, as in 2014 he made his first Pro Bowl team, in 2015 he also made the Pro Bowl team, and the very next season he'd make his first All-Pro team, and he'd stick with the team until 2019. What's funny is that Chris Harris and Aqib Talib both went to Kansas, and if you know anything about Kansas football, they are awful. So the fact that they have their two best players at the time in the league playing right on the opposite sides of each other on the same team is kind of crazy to think about. The last player from the secondary is safety TJ Ward, who they got from the Browns in the 2014 offseason, and besides 2014 and 2013, this is his only Pro Bowl season, and after this season, he'd only spend 2 more years in the league, with 2016 being the last with Denver. So it's weird because he was very good this season, and again played a big part on why the Broncos are so good this year. But after this year, he kind of fell off. It's weird to look at. When I was talking about Peyton Manning earlier, I mentioned his historic 2013 MVP season, and that entire season for the Broncos was amazing for them on the offensive side, but the defense only ranked 19th. This season, it was a complete opposite. They ranked number 1 in defense. The Broncos were one of the worst offenses in the league. They only had 1 Pro Bowl player on the offensive side of the ball, so the team identity took a whole shift, but they were arguably even better this year. Anyway, it's now time for the playoffs. In the divisional round, they would beat the 6th-seeded Steelers, and this wasn't really a surprise. Of course, the Broncos, having an amazing defense, would be facing a Steelers team without my good friend Antonio Brown, who was injured last week because Fontes Perfect gave him the hit that caused him to have CTE, so the Broncos winning here wasn't really a surprise, and they'd be moving on to the AFC Championship. But in the AFC Championship, they would have to face the New England Patriots. Of course, during this time, the New England Patriots were in the middle of their dynasty, and the dynasty New England Patriots had the capability to beat anyone at any time. And this was infamous because it'd be Peyton Manning and Tom Brady's possible last rodeo, so this one was for the ages. As expected, it was a tight defensive game all game long. However, at the very end, the Patriots would score a touchdown to cut the lead to 2, and on the 2-point conversion, the Broncos would stop them, and they would win 2018, and they'd be moving on to the Super Bowl. I would show you the clips and highlights, but I need to make money off YouTube. I'm at that point where I can't make any money, so I can't show any NFL clips. It's really unfortunate, but yeah, it's just the way how things are. Of course, any team in the Super Bowl, their opponent will not be easy, but this opponent was a little more different from other years. The 2015 Carolina Panthers went 15-1 and destroyed the Arizona Cardinals 49-15 in the NFC Championship, and honestly, we haven't seen a team quite good as them since that year, and they were led by quarterback Cam Newton, who had over 4,000 total yards, 45 total touchdowns, and just 10 interceptions, and he won the MVP that season. We haven't seen a season from a team or a player like that since, so the Broncos, this would be a very, very tough task. In the first half, the Broncos would go up 3-0, but the very next drive, Von Miller would strip sack Cam Newton, and Malik Jackson would recover it, and they would score, going up 10-0, and this was one of the most iconic plays in Super Bowl history. That play and this other strip sack by Von Miller would solidify the deal, and the Broncos would win the Super Bowl 24-10, establishing themselves as one of the greatest defenses of all time. Of course, Von Miller won Super Bowl MVP. His stats are right here: 6 total tackles, 2.5 sacks, and 2 forced fumbles. Throughout that whole season, many speculated this was Manning's last season, and it should have been, and it was. Peyton Manning retired just exactly a month later, and he'd go down as one of the few players in sports history to go on top. Now, what makes this defense, not just defense, this entire team so different and so special from all the other great defenses and Super Bowl champs from the past is that the Broncos have not been able to recover since this game. Since 2015, the Broncos haven't even been back to the postseason, which is the second longest route in the NFL right now, and they've had only one winning season, and that was right after 2015-2016, and they've bounced around way too many quarterbacks, which is the main reason. Trevor Siemian, Paxton Lynch, Joe Flacco, Drew Lock, and Russell Wilson most recently. They're now on to Bo Nix, who they drafted in the first round this year. And I'm sorry, Broncos fans, but I don't think he's it. I don't think he's the answer. Drew Lock would have been, but for some reason they fired his OC, which was a really, really dumb move. But you know what, Broncos fans, I'm really hoping Bo Nix is the answer. I'm really sorry for the downfall you all have experienced, and that's about it. Bye.